Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the world of Marvel Comics comes one of the most popular superhero teams of all time, featuring four powerful beings banded together to fight evil wherever it may roam on the Earth as well as in space, all while trying to live together as a loving but dysfunctional family. We're talking about the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and debuted in Fantastic Four #1 in November of 1961. It was the first superhero team created by Lee and Kirby, who were responsible for the birth of many legendary Marvel Comics characters. The Fantastic Four was created in response to a conversation between Lee and publisher Martin Goodman. Goodman wanted a book that could compete with the highly successful Justice League in DC Comics. The Fantastic Four's classic lineup consists of the brilliant scientist Reed Richards, his wife Sue Storm, Sue's brother Johnny, and Ben Grimm. The FF's origins saw the foursome travel to space on a scientific mission, but the trip goes awry when the family's spacecraft is bombarded with cosmic rays. The quartet soon finds that exposure to those rays has granted them all superpowers. Reed Richards becomes Mr. Fantastic with the ability to stretch his malleable body to extraordinary lengths. Sue gets the power of invisibility, becoming the Invisible Girl. Johnny develops the ability to engulf his body in flames, becoming the Human Torch. Ben Grimm's body changes to solid rock, making him the behemoth known as the Thing. The four became heroes, fighting a wide variety of villains in the Marvel Universe. Unlike other crime fighters, the Fantastic Four did not hide their faces from the public. They were also portrayed as an actual family with real-world problems, who often argued with each other. Thanks in large part to this realistic depiction, the Fantastic Four was an immediate hit with comic book readers. Stan Lee, who was contemplating leaving the comic book business behind before the Fantastic Four's release, decided to stay after the success of the book. The Fantastic Four became the centerpiece for the Marvel Universe and often crossed over with other heroes in other books. Animated cartoons followed, as well as 4 feature films. But despite the team's high-profile exposure in mainstream media, the Fantastic Four has yet to achieve the long-lasting success of other comic book properties. But after Disney's 2019 acquisition of 21st Century Fox, it was announced that the Fantastic Four would once again come to the silver screen, this time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Fantastic Four continues to be one of the most revered comic books of all time. The themes of family, adventure, heart, and home fuel the characters as well as the overall success of the books themselves. Despite what happens with the property moving forward, there will always be a place for Marvel's first family. And that's the lowdown on the Fantastic Four. So when we recorded the Justice League episode, the episode where we actually covered the Justice League film, that was fun. Phil will agree with me, I'm sure. We said pretty much, I think, Phil, you were the one that said this first during the course of the show, is that, man, it shouldn't be this hard to get this right. It shouldn't be this hard to make this film. And we kept repeating that through the course of the entire episode because it made it. I guess I had never heard anyone say it in those words before, but it made complete sense and it really struck a chord with me. So going into the Fantastic Four episode here, and thinking about how Marvel has done right by all these other properties that falls under the MCU umbrella, from Iron Man to Ant-Man. Who would have ever thought? If you had told me as a kid, hey, Tom, when you get to be a grown man, there's going to be an Ant-Man film. And not only is it going to be one, it's going to be good. I would have said, first of all, awesome. But then as I grew up, I would have said, nah, no chance. Because it's Ant-Man, and I mean, come on, man. Are you kidding me right now? Freaking Ant-Man. But they found a way to do it, and it was awesome, and it was entertaining, and they got the right people, and Paul Rudd is great. And that's a whole different podcast for another time. Paul Rudd's the man, I'm just saying. But, again, Fantastic Four. I go back to what you said initially, Phil, about Justice League. It shouldn't be this hard. So before we kick off with the show today, let's go ahead and get into the movie aspect of this. Tell me why you think it's so hard to get this right from a big screen perspective for the Fantastic Four?
Uh, I think we're just in this era. Everybody wants to make these big budget action movies, and I think there's such a big temptation to make Fantastic Four into just another one of these big team up movies that turns into like this big sprawling action movie. And I just don't think that Fantastic Four necessarily has to be that. There's a lot of things you could do with Fantastic Four that you couldn't do with another superhero property.
And I guess the reasoning for that, because you and I have talked off mic about this few different times in the past, is the fact that this thing is based on family. The roots of this entire story is based on the family concept. And you said something interesting to me when we talked about doing this particular episode, uh, and you'll have to repeat it for me. Something about you didn't know if that kind of theme. Do you think it scares like the younger audience, or they look at that as if to say, "I don't want to go watch a superhero film about a family"? I mean, what do you think about the concept of that maybe does not attract, say, younger viewers or any kind of age bracket for that matter?
Well, I think the specific nuclear family dynamic that came from Fantastic Four can be considered outdated for some people. Um, and that's not to say that a family of superheroes cannot work. We've seen where it has worked, but I think the very specific dynamic around the Fantastic Four looks dated because it just looks, it just looks like an old school way of looking at families. Like, I mean, just everything around Reed Richards and how he and Sue's relationship works, it just seems old fashioned.
And I mean, I guess because of the fact that this thing was introduced in 1961, and it does, and I'll say this to your point, it does kind of feel like, of all the books that have moved forward through the course of time for the publisher, for Marvel Comics, Fantastic Four does kind of still feel a little dated to me. And maybe that's not fair because I haven't been a consistent reader for all of these years. But I don't know, dude, of all the concepts they have, of all the titles that they have, uh, past, present, especially, it just feels as though this thing is kind of stuck in a time warp. Do you get that sense as well?
I can see that. I think it's also connected to just their origins and the time period that they started in. They're very connected to stuff like the nuclear war scare and the beginning of space travel and certain things that we're past at this point. Like those are not big conflicts anymore.
But it seems like the way to get this thing in 2021 would be the race to space on the, like, on the private side. We're seeing private companies getting into space now. It seems like a logical way to introduce this, which is what they did in the 2005 film. The entire story was that this was not NASA, right? This was Victor Von Doom, played by Julian McMahon, which a lot of fans had a heartburn with over day one because he's so pretty. But, I actually like the guy. I enjoy his work. I mean, we can get into the film here in a bit, but dude, I think that's the hook. I think that's the way in is this the race to space, like in terms of these private companies. I think that's your hook to get in. As far as the relationships between the characters, it's sort of that old fashioned, white picket fence. Sue has an apron on in the kitchen, and Johnny's out front with a dog or some nonsense. And I don't know, man. In my head, this whole thing feels like it's stuck in a certain time era. I don't think it helps that Reed Richards has gray in his hair, which is weird because Doctor Strange it's got like the same look. So it shouldn't matter to me, but I don't know, man. And here's the thing, dude. If I'm feeling this way, and I was a loyal, avid comic book fan, collector for years. I've got 7 long boxes to prove it of comics I've had since I was a kid. I mean, if guys like me are feeling that way, man, that's got to be the popular opinion out there, is that this thing is just too old fashioned. What do you think they can do Not just from a movie perspective. What do you think they can do to kind of, I don't know, make this, do I say make this thing younger again, or how do I put this? Make it appeal to a younger audience at this point?
I think you can make a contemporary Fantastic Four movie or a contemporary Fantastic Four story. Um, and I think the thing with Marvel in particular, and why Fantastic Four kind of stands out as like this kind of outdated or, you know, just even like too pristine property in comparison to the other ones is because they got popular with all of these other properties that were young and fresh and relatable, like the X-Men and Spider-Man, and even some of their other lesser known properties. And so when you go back to some of these properties like Captain America or um some of the other stuff that seems more like the timely stuff or like the DC stuff, they kind of stand out. Um, but we've seen that they've had success with Captain America by just sticking to what the roots are and also just finding a way to reach a happy middle ground. And I think that's very possible with Fantastic Four.
That's a great comparison. I'm sitting here talking about, it's old fashioned and stuff, and you throw Captain America at me. Completely dismantled my entire argument because, dude, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. They found a way to make Captain America cool. And a lot of guys half my age, a lot of kids today would, without the MCU, probably would never look at Captain America again because he is sort of an old fashioned character in terms of his age and, how old he actually is, that kind of thing. I mean, but yeah, dude, they found a way to do it, and make it work. It's no coincidence here, kids, that we're talking about Cap, portrayed by Chris Evans. Chris Evans is in the 2005 Fantastic Four film, portraying Johnny Storm. Odd coincidence, right? I guess, but God, he's so good in that film. He's good in anything. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a bad Chris Evans movie.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the thing with Cap is they managed to take stuff from the Brubaker Cap run, which is like if you're a Captain America fan and you don't read comics, like that's the run to read because
Yes.
it's the most modern and it's like that's where they got all the Winter Soldier stuff from, and bits and pieces of his characterization in Civil War from there. Um, so I think they just got to find like a tentpole run for Fantastic Four like that, and just stick to using what worked in that.
Dude, I think you're right. I think that might be the way in terms of the story. Um, just find something that works. I mean, that's talk about the Daredevil TV series on Netflix, and they used a lot of stuff from the Frank Miller run. Obviously, you can't do a Daredevil series or tell a Daredevil story without touching on Frank Miller stuff. The whole aesthetic of Hell's Kitchen and the betrayal of Karen Page, which we never got to see in the show, oddly enough. A lot of the other stuff is in there with Matt Murdock's mom and things of that nature. So, but yeah, man, I'm with you. Just pick an arc that works, that got over, that had the fans talking, that sold a bunch of books and became a cornerstone for that particular title. And Fantastic Four is what we're talking about. I think you're right. I think that's where they need to go. How young would you go? And I'm kind of all over the place here with my questions, but I'm in my head. I'm bouncing around like crazy right now for some reason because I'm thinking about what they do moving forward. How young do you go with Johnny Storm? Do you think there will be a knee jerk reaction? Because listen, kids, rewind for just a second. So 20th Century Fox, Disney, because Disney owns everything. Disney's buying everything. They're welcome to buy my show. Tom wants to get paid. So don't think my show's not up for sale, everybody. I'm just saying, if anybody from Disney's listening, Phil and I will sell out gladly. It's no problem at all. So I have no issue with that at all. But, because of that, the characters that Marvel gave to 20th Century Fox and had the rights to and were using through that company are now coming back to Disney. So there's already been a tease put out there that Fantastic Four is indeed coming. It could happen through WandaVision, could happen through any number of different things. So we're eventually going to see a Fantastic Four film. Now, I'll ask you this. Do you think there's a knee-jerk reaction to make this thing work for the younger audience? How young I don't know. Do you go 18 years old with Johnny Storm? Do you dare to go that young? I mean, you can't really put an 18-year-old in space. It'd have to tweak the story. But do you think there would be a knee jerk reaction? Or do you think they'd just find a way to just make it work?
Well, I think it depends on how young you make Sue and Reed. And I think there's a way to do a really young cast and make it work. Phew, that 2015 movie is a colossal mess,
Oh
but
my God.
there are things in it that works, and I don't think going with a cast that young was a bad idea, and I don't think taking the approach of using what worked from the Ultimate Fantastic Four's first arc as a first movie is a bad idea either. Um, I actually enjoyed maybe the first 40 minutes or so of that movie just because I knew where it came from as a fan of the Ultimate Fantastic Four books. Um, and it was interesting how they used that um, to start the movie. And like I said, I don't think that was a bad idea. Now, where they went with it afterwards, that's where they kind of got in a little trouble.
This, and I'm watching in particular exactly what you're talking about. And I'm only 20 minutes in, but you're exactly right. And this thing is utterly charming. The first half of this movie is utterly charming. I'm not saying the second half goes off the rails. I don't know what it does for you. It doesn't quite do that for me. I think it's an entertaining film. And I like the scene at the club when the thing's at the bar.
Oh, are you talking about the 2005 movie?
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. I'm jumping around. Yes, you're
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have a problem with the 2005 movie. It's a bit goofy and campy, but I
Right.
think if you're gonna do Fantastic Four, you're gonna have to add a little bit of camp.
Yes. Yeah, you can add a little bit and get away with it. No, well, let me jump to the 2015 edition. You're completely right with what you said. The first 20 to 30 to 40 minutes, sure, absolutely. And then, yeah, for me, it's a like you said, colossal mess. Um, so I guess they took the idea of we got to young this up. Reed can't be having gray hair. We got to make this thing, for this generation. And even if you've got, it just goes to show you, man, if you've got the right ideas in place, even if you've got the right notions in place, if the story's not there, you could throw all the money you want to at it. It's not going to work. I mean, that's obvious. And that movie didn't work for a lot of different reasons. I got to be honest with you, man. As soon as that movie hit, I said, well, this is probably done. I mean, how many times does a franchise get 3 at bats? I mean, where I come from, you get 3 strikeouts, you're out of the game. So, did you think after that film it was over?
Well, no, only because I would consider Fantastic Four a flagship title,
Right.
and I think that's the thing that people kind of forget in the magic of Marvel Studios making all these other intellectual properties into mainstream successful movies. Um, Fantastic Four used to be a flagship title. It used to be up there with Spider-Man and X-Men. Those were the flagship titles.
Right.
Avengers wasn't a flagship title until like the late 2000s and onward. So that's why I didn't think that it was done. There's always a way for a property that big that makes that kind of money in comic sales to come back and do something. And we've seen that with Spider-Man. Spider-Man's got what 3 reboots at this point. Um,
Right.
so you can reboot this thing and make it work, but I I just think you've got to get the right person at the helm of it, and you've got to get a concerted effort to decide what you want this universe to look like.
Yeah, you got to get the right guy at the helm. They didn't have it for either film. I mean, there was some great efforts made in the first movie, and that's the one I am currently watching. You're right, I am bouncing around. The first half of this movie is utterly charming. It really is. And if anybody's never seen the original well, I can't say the original. We'll get to that one. Uh, the
um,
second edition. Have you seen the Roger Corman original Fantastic Four film from the 80s, by the way?
no, I've only seen like pictures online and stuff, but I've never actually seen a movie.
It's on YouTube. The full film is on YouTube. You got to go out of your way to watch it because it's horrible.
um, no, but the things that work about that 2005 movie. I thought most of the casting was great.
Yes.
I thought you probably picked a perfect Reed Richards. I mean, I think in a better setting, if they had written him a little bit better and they had taken it a little bit more seriously, he would have been perfect. Um, I mean, I thought Michael Chiklis was great. I thought he nailed the, all of the, relatable things that you would want in Ben Grimm. And he also is very likable and amicable in the role as well. And I thought Chris Evans was a great Johnny Storm. The only casting I was kind of on the fence with was Jessica Alba, and she didn't do terrible, but
No.
I didn't. I wasn't sure when I think Jessica Alba did I think Sue Storm.
Yeah, and she dyed her hair blonde.
Blue
Sh
contacts.
Yeah,
It was a little bit too much. It was too much trying to make her look like what you would think Sue would look like. And Jessica Alba is Latina, right?
I was just gonna ask you. I know there's some ethnicity in there, but I didn't know what it was. Is that weird? Is that dude, I don't want to I think whitewashing is a huge bad word for this circumstance, but it kind of feels like we got to make her white. Is that am I reading this wrong or what?
Yeah, I think there was some definitely trying to. I wouldn't use the term whitewashing, but there was definitely some trying to make her look as white and a amalgamation of what we would expect of the comic version of the character to look like, and
Mm,
it just didn't work for me. And I thought she was fine in the first movie.
yeah.
I didn't like a lot of the goofy "Oops, I'm naked" gags. I didn't think the movie needed that. Um,
Right.
all of the like I'm invisible, but look, I'm in my underwear because it's Jessica Alba and we have to have her in the underwear. I didn't think that was
Yeah.
needed, and I because the thing is, Sue is a character that I think is very intelligent, and if you're not gonna give her that kind of dignity and stuff, why are you doing it? That's just the way I look at it. And then the other part that people don't really realize, Sue is the most powerful member of the team.
Good point. Because she can do more than just turn invisible. She can do the force fields and can't she like use the force fields as like to like as blast? Like she moves. What does she like? She moves the air around her. What does she do exactly with that?
Yeah, I know she can do those like blasts. She can fit her force fields in the pockets and places and expand them. Um, there's so many things like she can do with her powers that make her more interesting than I think she was portrayed in that movie.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I'm getting to this scene where Ben is trying to tell his fiance that something's happened. She comes out of the apartment building wearing her nightie with with a robe on. And I mean, dude, she is practically naked in the street at night with people just walking around. Man, talk about a tone deaf moment. Okay, now I'm starting to look at this movie and say, "Oh, what's going on here?" Wow.
Well, but see again, I think those are all of those trappings of what comic book movies were at that time in 2005. Because you
Right.
got to think at the time we hadn't seen comic book movies do what they do now and succeed just on the merits of being comic book movies. You had to make it into something that looked like what regular action movies look like, and you had to throw the cheesy stuff with women in there because they thought that appealed to that crowd that was going to watch those kind of movies.
Right. Yeah, you're right, man. It's a totally different era. Thank goodness, because we suffered through a lot of bad films back in the day, kids. If you've never watched them,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I'm very much glad that we have kind of moved out of that with women in some of these movies. I think we talked about that in the Black Panther episode we recorded, and how, like, could you just imagine if they did that with any of the women in that movie, of us, walking like T'Challa walking in on Nakia getting dressed or something like that. Like, it's just so unneeded.
yeah, dude. I have never. It's kind of a sidebar here. I've never been that guy. Even as a younger man, I've never cared about anything like that. Just that sensationalistic. Oh, can we put her in a bra here? Because that'd be great. Like, to me, if it doesn't suit the story, even if the film is filled with profanity from start to finish, like, dude, I curse, I do. I'm not gonna make any secret about it, but um, do I want that, and do I want sex, and do I want bras and panties and stuff in my film? Well, is it serving the story? And
Yeah.
forget not just comic book films, but in general. And if the answer is no, it's just there, then take it out. I don't need that. Like,
Yeah, it depends on the character.
right,
I think there are definitely some characters where sexuality is a part of, their depiction, and that's fine, as long
right.
as it's done in a way that, like you said, fits the story. But for a character like Sue, you just don't need that.
Yeah, and especially because her character is, I mean, now not in the film, no kid at that point, but we do know in the comics that she becomes a mother, and she's like the house, not a housewife, but that's how she's portrayed. Again, in my head, it's 1961. Dude, why can't I get out of my head on this? It's so odd. I can't, every time I think Fantastic Four, I think the original book. I'm reading the original book, and I've never held an original copy in my hands. That would be awesome. But I've read the actual, reprinted book many times over the years. I'm like, God, this is so 1961. I don't know, man. It just sticks with me. Did you collect Fantastic Four at any point?
No. For a long time, I wasn't a Fantastic Four fan.
Hmm.
But that's because, like, when I was a Marvel fan in the '90s, I took to all of the edgy stuff that we saw on TV, all of the TV, all of the cartoons we got. Like, I was a big Iron Man guy because of the '90s cartoon show.
Right.
I was a big Daredevil guy, Spider Man, of course, and then like X-Men was the biggest thing going at the time because of the cartoon and some of the other stuff. It took me a little bit while longer to get into Fantastic Four, even though they had their cartoon at the time as well. And I did like that show, but it seemed like what I didn't like about DC Comics, if I'm being honest. Like, it seemed like it was too hokey in the same way that I see Superman as hokey in some ways.
Right.
Um, and so it took me a little while longer to get the appeal of the character. I didn't really grasp it until, I want to say, like, when I started reading comics a lot, and I started reading like the Wade and Waringo stuff was great. There's a like I said, I like the Ultimate Fantastic Four stuff. The Hickman stuff is great.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it took me venturing into the comics and actually trying to, like, find a arc and a writer that got them in a way that I found them interesting.
Yeah, that's the key right there, is getting your way in, finding a reason to pick it up. I mean, I've done that with books many times over the years. Where, like you said, I wasn't much into the character for whatever reason, but it's a new writer artist team. It's a flashy new cover. It's a new run, new idea. I'm like, fine, I'll pick it up and check it out and give it a whirl. I mean, I found myself falling in love with characters over the years because of that, because I did give them a chance. And then once I'm hooked, then I go back and look at the previous books and start to try to get something out of it. It's worth mentioning here that Fantastic Four was the first Marvel team book and the first Marvel book
Right.
at that point. Which, dude, there's so much history here. I mean, the popular story has always been that the leader at the time of Marvel, which was called Timely Comics at that time, was playing golf with the guy that was running DC, and at that time it was National Publications, I believe they were called. And the guy was bragging about the success of Justice League. So he goes back and tells Stan Lee this stuff. Says, we need to do a team book. And then Stan Lee just took that idea and ran from there. I mean, that story's been disputed a few times over the years. Supposedly the golf course thing may or may not have happened, but he did pitch an idea of a team book to Stan. And Stan comes up along with Jack Kirby, of course, with the Fantastic Four. And man, for that reason alone, this thing has to make it. I mean,
Yeah.
that answers my previous question of, do you think they give up? Well, no, they can't give up. This is the first team book. I mean, to do this thing justice in the MCU would be a huge feat.
Yeah.
Monster.
I mean, just to go back to what we just said about Spider-Man and how there's something to be said about rebooting it and having it under Marvel's umbrella and having it where it belongs. I mean, I don't know about other people, but when I went to go see Homecoming, and I've seen all other Spider-Man movies, I'm a big Spider-Man fan.
Mhm.
But when I sat down and the Marvel flag ran over it and they played the old 60s Spider-Man theme, I was tearing up because I was like,
Yes.
he's at home. He's where he belongs.
That's great. That's great. The guy in the subway with the cowboy, was it Subway or in Times Square? The naked cowboy singing, right? It was singing the Spider-Man song. It was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Um,
and I mean, of course, Stan has always had a presence in all of his properties at other movies too, because he gets the cameos. But it's just something about having his properties back under the Marvel umbrella and being in the same universe with those other characters that feels special.
yeah, and I just made that reference to the cowboy guy, but pop culture is what I'm getting at. Spider-Man is so ingrained in pop culture. You know, we said on the show before that you could take that Superman shield probably to any corner of the world and show it, and someone they're going to recognize it. They may not have ever bought a comic, maybe can't even speak English, maybe never even tried, maybe never met someone that speaks English, but they would know what that shield is. I mean, worldwide pop culture recognition, mainstream recognition. Spider Man, in terms of Marvel Comics, I don't know of another character. We've talked about a lot of them here on this show in particular. I mean, how many Marvel characters can you say has permeated and gotten into every corner of mainstream pop culture better than Spider Man? And they did do justice to this character. I mean, they did make it work. Fantastic Four should be up there, man. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of a
Yeah,
shame it's not.
yeah, and I very much want to see them get the reinvention they deserve in the MCU and get the love that they deserve. I again, it took me a while to get what is it that makes these characters tick and understand um, why they still have a place among comic properties at the moment. And I think as long as you get the sci-fi stuff work right, then the movie will work. Because like if I look at the Hickman run in particular, Hickman leaned into all the sci-fi and fantasy stuff, and I think that's what made it so interesting. I think if you make this like a very hardcore sci-fi movie in a way that's different than the other Marvel movies, then I think that'll give it its hook.
Mm, I like that. I love that idea, man. I love that idea of give it something to stand apart from every other film that they're doing.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at even like if we go back to the Cap stuff, those Cap movies work because they fit into a very specific genre. Like the first Cap movie is a very specific like period piece. It's very similar to Rocketeer, and then the next two movies are very much like espionage. I mean, the third one is kind of away from espionage stuff because it's such a big crossover. But still, like the espionage tones are there, and you don't get that in some of the other Marvel movies. In the same way that the Iron Man movies are kind of their own thing, or even like right now, like the Doctor Strange movies are becoming their own thing, and the Thor movies are their own thing.
Yeah, they're getting their own identities, right? I mean, it makes perfect sense. Finding a hook, finding a way in, finding something to make it stand apart. The Cap analogy just works. Ever since you first made it here, man, it fits perfectly. So I guess the obvious answer to this question is, well, because Justice League has Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and Flash and Green Lantern and fantastic, awesome, huge monster heavy hitters, characters known around the world, and that's why it's hard to do that film. But they did it, and it was, ugh, right?
Well, we're gonna see the second attempt in a few weeks.
Yes, we are.
The Snyder cut.
Fingers, fingers crossed, kids. But in terms of how you approach this versus how you approach that, it seems like there's more. Even though you said, and I totally agree with you, it shouldn't be this hard to do Justice League, and you're 100% right. But it seems like if there's more opportunities to screw up a film of this nature, it would be Justice League. It
Right.
seems like screwing up Fantastic Four shouldn't shouldn't be, I can't say possible because we saw him do it, but it seems like it should be easier to nail this one to me than even Justice League.
Well, absolutely, because Justice League is more ambitious. You're trying to get, it's essentially a big crossover film. Um, so Fantastic Four is different. It's just getting a good film on with these four characters. And you don't have to bring them together; they're already on in the same property. Um, I just think, the problem has been trying to make it fit into all of these stereotypes into what an action movie is or what worked for other comic book movies. You don't have to do that with Fantastic Four, and I think if anybody understands that is Marvel, because it's their baby, and I have to I have to believe that somebody at Marvel is like, nope, we don't have to do this. Like, this is where we can approach this from, and it'll work. And I mean, we have enough evidence at this point that they've got this. They know how to do it. Um, but just to press on my point, like I said, all of the goofy stuff in Fantastic Four, like the 2005 movie that didn't work, is because they tried to make it too much into this action movie, or put all of these gags in there that didn't need to be there. Um,
Mm.
I mean, you can look at a ton of ways of how they tried to do that version of Doctor Doom and why it didn't work, because they tried to make it into this action movie, and it just didn't need to necessarily be that. And that's totally what happened with 2015 movie as well, because the movie at first, before they get any powers, before they put any costumes on or anything, the movie's going fine. And then once they try and go, oh, we got to have all the big action film things, we got to have like a chase scene and all of this, like, big pieces that you would see in other movies, that's when it started to get bad.
Yeah, it's like force feeding it, making it, trying to make it. I can't say make it be something it's not, but for the version they did for that 2015 film, it wasn't what what we expected. So I don't know, dude. You're telling a different story in a different way with a younger cast, and then you have to force feed it into the Fantastic Four template when maybe you just make the Fantastic Four to begin with. It's like, well, we have to make this movie, but we got to turn it into this. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean they were kind of behind the eight ball from the jump, right?
Yeah, and I mean all this stuff like the portal and everything. I mean, all of the stuff they did in that movie is about as close to Ultimate Fantastic Four as you can get. I mean, like, even like the entire project and going into the portal, that is right out of that Bendis book. But I just think once you try to go, oh well, we have to have this big fight scene, and oh, we want to do this horror stuff too, and we want to put all of this body horror stuff in there that didn't work. It's like, yeah, just make a Fantastic Four movie, guys. It's not that difficult.
Yeah, because God, they had the budget. Obviously, they had the budget. But man, a lot of that stuff goes back to Josh Trank, and I don't know how much that deserved or not deserved. But man, all kinds of stories were coming out during the shooting of the film. That's never a good sign. It
Yeah,
doesn't always mean tragedies coming or train wrecks coming, but man, in this case, it most certainly did.
it seemed like there was some studio meddling too. It seemed like
Yeah.
Fox wanted it to be a very specific way. They want this to be a moneymaker, and they want it to be, one of these blockbuster action movies. I knew we might have been in some trouble when it had the old trope that we were seeing from every comic book movie at the time of a beam going into the sky. Like, we see that in almost every comic book movie at this point. There's like a big action movie that's centered around some kind of structure with a big beam going into the sky. And I was like, oh, well, here we go.
It's like the old, it's like Ghostbusters, like was the Empire State Building, I think, had that. Maybe it was Ghostbusters 2 I'm thinking of. But yeah, it's like, yeah, you're totally right. Tropes are hard to get away from in the comic book genre. Even the well-made comic book films are still going to have some because, okay, so let me pitch this to you. At this point for the MCU edition, do you bother with an origin story or do you just hit the ground running with the team as is?
That's a good question, because I think you could introduce them without doing an origin. Um, but it all depends on what you are planning to do. If you want to take this and do some universe building, and you've already built a good a good foundation with all of your galactic stuff with Marvel. Um, so you could just throw them in the middle of that. You've got a big sandbox to play with. Um, but at the same time, there is a chance to go back and do some cool stuff with their origin. So I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, because they didn't do an origin with Spider-Man and it worked great.
Good
Um,
point. Yeah.
so you could do you could do this without an origin, but I don't know. I there's a way to do flashbacks. I mean, it just all depends on what they want to do because the you've had the MCU so long because we're going away from, like you said, they were the first Marvel comic. So there is some some thought that you should have them as characters that have been around all along, but it's impossible to do that when you've had a franchise that's been going for 10 years, over 10 years. So you can't just be like, oh well, Fantastic Four has just been over here all this time, and you've got stuff like the snap happening and they never appeared. Like, it'd be hard to do
Mm.
that.
But you explain it by having alternate, the multiverse, alternate Earths, and then they get sucked into uh, the traditional 616. I don't know if the MCU is even calling it that, but they get sucked into this reality. So now they are, like, in their world, they were a mainstay. They were the superheroes of that world. I mean, that's an easy fix. I mean, and maybe you don't need an origin story. Maybe you see the origin story in flashbacks. I I think you're right. I think it all depends on how they introduce him, how they get him. Like you said, Spider-Man didn't need it. And by the way, you couldn't do a Spider-Man origin again because Randy Savage is no longer with us. And if anybody's if anybody's gonna play Bonesaw McGraw, it's freaking Macho Man, kids. That's it. No one else gets to do that. Not Goldberg, not Hogan, nobody. Only Savage. I stick to that.
Yeah, we don't need to see Uncle Ben get shot again. We've seen
No.
it twice. We don't need to see him get shot again. It's okay.
Good point. Yeah. Way, way good point. So yeah, he
We can go all day on how the first movies did his origin all the justice that we needed, and we don't need it. We don't need to go back to it because I mean everything, all of the beats from him standing over Uncle Ben as he was passing away, and the flashback going on in his head of the robber that he let get away. All of it is played so perfectly, all the way down to the end of the movie, and him, saying, I don't need a dad. I had a dad. His name was Ben," and I just teared up because it's just perfect. It's just you cannot write a Spider-Man origin story any better for movies than that.
yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. And it goes back to Batman for me. How many times do I need to see Batman's parents getting shot in Crime Alley? How many
No,
times is
yeah,
that necessary?
yeah, you can do a flashback of that, and everybody knows what you're referencing. You don't have to do it all over again.
Yeah, I don't. It just becomes, like I said, pop culture. It becomes part of pop culture, so you don't need to even worry about it anymore. I mean, I don't know if the Fantastic Four is there yet. To be fair, I don't know if they're there yet. So maybe I don't know. Maybe Marvel will feel the need. Um,
Well, that's why I said it depends on how they want to introduce them because there's a way to um, give their origin a contemporary spin that doesn't have anything to do with space travel if they would like to do that. But if they want to have the roots of that, I can see not going back to the origin and just noting like all the space travel stuff later.
right, right, right. Yeah, hit the ground running. I love the dynamics, and it just depends on what version you're talking about, whether it's the 2005 film or the sequel, which we haven't really talked about. I don't think we mentioned it one time here, Rise of the Silver Surfer, which I don't know, man. You either like that movie or you can't stand it. I thought, in my opinion, I loved seeing Silver Surfer on the big screen. I know with today's technology, you could do even better, obviously. Um, I thought they did the best with what they had at the time. One of the things for me with both films, and like I said, I enjoyed both films. I really did. I still do. and even though they didn't go stingy on the budget, you can totally tell that they spent money on both of these films.
Yeah.
But man, Fantastic Four for me, it feels so big. It feels like Reed Richards is not just a scientist. This
Yeah.
guy, smartest guy on the planet, bar none, and can look into the cosmos. And I don't know, just that much intelligence to try to wrap your head around. It kind of feels like, I said for years you can't make a Watchmen film. You can't. It's too big. I was right, everybody. Uh, I mean, they made it, but I just, it depends on, again, that's a whole different podcast. But the Fantastic Four, for me, it was like, this is too big. Of all the properties Marvel has, it's Interstellar, for crying out loud. But then, dude, they did Guardians. Dude, if they can do Guardians, shut up.
Yeah, they can definitely do a Fantastic Four movie and give it the scale that it deserves. And I would say that that's one of the issues with those two movies. It didn't feel like it had the scale that it deserved. It was too. First of all, I feel like too much of it took place in New York. And I would say for sure, one of the things I would like to see if they do when they do the Fantastic Four movie is to see them get off world and to see them do stuff in other places. Like this is Fantastic Four. They're explorers. We should see them in space. We should see them in a microverse. We should see them going against interstellar villains. It was very cool to see Silver Surfer on screen. I thought he looked fantastic. We don't have to get into Galactus and the problems with that. But
it's a cloud. I'll say it. It was a freaking cloud.
Yeah, I mean, I thought there was cool things they did with the visuals. Like once you got inside the cloud, you could see his helmet, and you you saw like his shadow. That stuff's cool, but like there's certain things you can do with like those interstellar villains because those are big, world beating villains. Like those are villains on the scale of Thanos that you can introduce later and do things with. I tell you one thing for sure, I wasn't the biggest fan of the second movie, but it definitely made me want to see the Super Skrull on film because when Johnny has all four of their powers and he's using all of them at will, I was like, we've got to see Super Skrull at some point.
That's good stuff, man. That's good stuff. I actually forgot about that bit, but yeah, you're right. Really good. This team is so entrenched in Marvel lore, in Marvel history, so much history to draw from, so many great stories to take this and turn it into Marvel's next big thing. When really it's been there the whole time. The relationships between these characters, again, depending on what version you're talking about and where you're getting it from, like between Ben and Johnny, Chris Evans, soon to be Captain America, was Johnny Storm, obviously. And so good. He's so good. Him and Chiklis, talk about charisma and like connection between these two. The chemistry they had was so, dude, light years better than Jessica Alba and Ioan Griffith, which is how his name is pronounced. If anyone's wondering, Ioan Griffith is how it's actually. So if you're like me, Phil, you never knew how to pronounce his name, but that's how you do it. Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree. I thought the backbone of that first movie was Johnny and Ben's relationship and their, love-hate relationship, so to speak, of them, playing off each other and Johnny being a pesky like younger brother to him in some ways. And I think that is one of those dynamics that needs to be in a Fantastic Four movie. And I thought that was one of the things that they got perfectly in that movie. The whole like him, using the thing to tickle his nose and putting the shaving cream in his hand and making him splash on his face. All that stuff is stuff Johnny would do.
Yes. And you and I have talked before on another episode here about, how do you get this team into the MCU? And you were mentioning earlier about they need to be off world. I could not agree more with that statement. This is a globe trotting team. That's what they should be. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark 6M Podcast sent you. I mean, you need Stark level tech, which you have Dr. Reed Richards. And I mean, just imagine, they bring this team into the MCU and you've got, Dr. Reed Richards and Stark Tower. I mean, God, what kind of conversations could be had there? It's like, hey, oh my God, dude, do you bring... Okay, so Downey has not discounted the possibility of coming back for something. Is Tony Stark also dead in that alternate reality, in the multiverse where the Fantastic Four are coming from? Like, how intricate do you get with this? Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's why I'm like, it depends on how far you want to do this. Because if you want to make this origin, you can always say that they bought Avengers Tower and changed it into Baxter Tower. I mean, because Avengers Tower has already existed. We already know that somebody bought it. They never said who bought it. You could always say that they bought it and turned it into the Baxter Building. There's stuff that you can do. I mean, there have already been laying seeds for certain things that I don't think are a coincidence. So it just depends on what they want to do. I mean, you could do an origin in the Marvel universe and it works. There's so many villains that they haven't touched on with all of the galactic stuff that are threats. I mean, we already know that Skrulls exist. We already know like that the Kree exists. So there's still so many things that they haven't touched on. Like, I mean, I'm sure we're gonna get more of that with Eternals. But like just even like the Celestials and all that stuff, they've got so much stuff they could use.
Every time you think maybe the MCU might have a miss or might have a misstep, they end up, for the most part, proving us wrong. I mean, Guardians looked good from a distance. I'm a Batista fan, and I'm a fan of the cast in general. But then I saw the film, like, oh my God, this is so freaking good. Like, they've captured the sci-fi, the humor, they've captured everything. It's like a hip Star Wars. That's what this is. Like, it just fires on all cylinders. So the Eternals part, though, man, dude, I don't know. I can't say I got a bad feeling, but man, if there's a possible misfire, because does the Eternals for you feel like it's way too disconnected from what we've seen so far in the MCU?
I think it would be easy for it to be a miss. But it all depends on how they ground it. It all depends on who they've got at the helm of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we already know John Watt is directing the Fantastic Four movie, right?
I think you're right. Yeah.
Which already makes me excited. I mean, we've talked so much about Spider-Man in this already, but Spider-Man is intrinsically connected to the Fantastic Four. And if any character in the Marvel universe should have a relationship with the Fantastic Four, it's Peter Parker. So there's gotta, like, having him direct those movies says a lot to me. I think that's I like what he's done with the Spider-Man franchise, and I would hope that means we're going to see Spider-Man in some way in Fantastic Four movies. I don't know, but it should happen.
Because as we said on another episode, and I was talking about it a little bit earlier, I mean, Peter might be Johnny Storm's way into the MCU, like the way to connect that character, and they're friends, they're around the same age. Maybe you do young him up. I mean, if you don't choose to do the astronaut, origin story, if you choose to go a little bit different path with it, but maybe you do make him 18. Maybe you make him 20 years old. Maybe you make him close enough to Peter's age where you could picture these two guys kind of hanging out and shooting the breeze. I mean, to me, that works, man. It makes sense.
Yeah, I think their friendship is definitely a way to, tie him in and make Johnny more relatable for some viewers. And I mean, like that's our first view of Spider-Man in comics is Amazing Fantasies, um, and that's connected to Fantastic Four. So, like I said, if any character in the MCU has to have a relationship with them, it's Peter Parker. Um, so I don't know. I think long as you have the director connected to this thing that understands what you want to do and brings the correct vision to this movie, then it works. Because I don't think Guardians of the Galaxy works without the director we got.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody else could have given this thing the heart that it deserved at that time, and I don't think we would have cared as much about those characters without what James Gunn did.
He had a vision. He knew what was. He felt like he knew how to make this thing click, and he was completely right.
Yeah,
Obviously, because
yeah,
it worked on every level.
I would say the same thing about Black Panther for sure. Like I don't think Black Panther was what it was without Coogler. I just
Absolutely.
don't think it. I don't think it had the same. I don't think it had the same energy to it. I don't think it had the same interpersonal relationships. I just don't think it would have clicked the same way without such a great director behind it. So I think Fantastic Four and Eternals, for what you're saying, are just all gonna hinder on who is at the helm of the thing. What does the script look like? Um, that's what does scare me a little bit with the Fantastic Four, to be honest. With John Watt directing it, is that they just plugged in a guy that's in their system already, that's already been doing franchises with them, and they're just plugging him in with their ideas. I would kind of like to see somebody that has a track record of directing big budget sci-fi movies and has like a vision for those kind of things and come in and do something totally different. But that's me being ambitious as a fan.
I think you're right, man. I think it all comes down to having the right guy with the right vision. I mean, we've said for a long time since the first Iron Man, without Kevin Feige sort of being the Vince McMahon of this thing, saying yes or no, and being the head of it, and having the vision, and bringing the right people on board to make that vision become reality, the MCU never happens. So,
Yeah, yeah. If you don't have John Favreau in that first Iron Man movie, it is not what it was. I mean, you talk about a complete 180 too. I just watched Iron Man 3 over the weekend, and everything Shane Black brought to that franchise, and just all of the quirks and all of the character that he brings in with Robert Downey Jr. Man, that's what I mean when a director can completely change a movie and make it into something bigger than what it has any right to be.
yeah. Yeah, 100% right. And John Watts, of course, directed Homecoming and Far From Home. You know, we were kind of talking a little bit about the multiverse and getting the FF off world and stuff, which is, I mean, it's a must do thing. We kind of got what we thought was a glimpse of a multiverse because you had Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. It turns out it was all a sham, but that was Marvel, I think, in some small part kind of winking at you a little bit as they did in the first Iron Man when Cap has Tony has Cap's shield on his work desk and says, "Hey, you know what this is? You know what this is?" And then he uses it to like prop something up on his work desk, and they never speak of it again. But it's like I think maybe that's just a little wink to the audience, like, look, everybody relax. We're gonna get there. We'll get there in time. Just take it easy. But because it turns out Mysterio wasn't anything that he said he was. But man, it opened up all kinds of doors for me in my head about, oh, we're looking at a multiverse. Oh, this is awesome. So there's been fan theories about, do you put the FF in the quantum realm? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could definitely do multiverse stuff with Fantastic Four. I mean, you've already established all this stuff with Ant-Man as well, in the microverse and all these other places. There's
Right.
so many things you can do, and I mean, we already know that Ant-Man existed before the Ant-Man movies. And so
Right.
there's a way, like if you want to date the Fantastic Four and say that they have existed in some kind of iteration since then as well, that works because you already have other heroes that existed at that time. Um, but it all, like I said, all depends on how you want to tie it in.
Dude, that's good because you could explain aging process, you could explain all kinds of stuff. I mean, maybe not stuck in the quantum realm, but using the quantum realm to get somewhere else. And then they stayed there. I don't know. I mean, the good thing about this, man, is that it's the possibilities here there's just a ton of possibilities here, man. So much different stuff you can do. So many different ways you can bring this thing to life in the MCU. I mean,
I mean, you could make a case that someone like you could make a case that a young Reed Richards started studying a lot of the stuff around the blip, and he's been active for the last 4 years in between Endgame and Infinity War, and we
hmm,
didn't know about it all the time. You could easily do
interesting.
that. You could make a movie spanning back 4 years and have his journey and having the formation of the Fantastic Four happen in those 4 years when everybody else was blipped.
So it was 5 years since okay, 5 years since they disappeared or four. I was thinking it was five.
Uh, Okay, I think it's 5. I think you're right, but whatever the time
Whatever the
period,
time is. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you can have them. That's why I'm like, there's so many possibilities. That's why it's so hard for me to say nope. Don't do an origin story at all because there's so many interesting ways they could do it if they want to, refine it in some ways.
And the last 5 years is the origin story, dude. That might be that might be winner winner chicken dinner right there. Just the past 5 years is the origin story. We just haven't seen it because we just got back.
Yeah,
In terms of storytelling for them, see, we just got back. So like,
yeah, and I
yeah,
mean,
that makes sense.
there's a perfect void to create them in because there was no Avengers at that time. There was no Avengers as we know it. They were all, disassembled.
Right. Right. Wow. I think there's a world in which that completely works, man. And I think the key here, man, is don't force feed it. Don't force feed it. Don't try to make it something it's not. Um, Speaking of changing, I don't want to say make it something it's not, but giving a different take. What is your what is your specific take on? Well, not only do we have to like the 2015 film, obviously, not only do we have to get the cast up, we're going to make Johnny African American instead of white, which changes the relationship if they're not blood relatives. Doesn't mean it makes it worse, or it just means it's a different type of story. I mean, what's your take on that? Do you care about changing and all that stuff? Does it matter to you, or is the whole point of this as long as it's a good story?
Here's my thing, because we've seen this, people changing the race of characters several times
Right,
from movies.
right,
I don't think race should matter unless your race is a part of your character in a big way in the comic books. For example, Captain America is a white man. Everything about his upbringing, he's white. Um,
right,
just in the same, there's too many story elements in Captain America that frame around his race and his particular standing in America at that time. So he has to be cast as a white man. Um, and there are other characters like that. Of course, Black Panther, because his race is such a big part of his character.
right.
And so those things, like, I don't think Johnny Storm's race is a big part of his character, personally. So I didn't have a problem with them casting Michael B. Jordan. I thought Michael B. Jordan did the best he could. I don't think the cast is a problem with the 2015 movie. If anything, I thought they got scared at making Sue and Johnny both black. I think if you make them both black, it's fine. But trying to
Mm.
go, nope, just Johnny's black. We're gonna still make Sue, this blonde haired, blue eyed woman, and they're related. And we're gonna bring in their dad, who's a fantastic actor. I can't think of his name at the moment. Just passed away not too long ago. He was Luke. He was Luke Cage's father in the show as well. Um,
Yes, he was. That's right.
and he was their dad in the movie. And but my thing is, if you're gonna go that route and have him as their dad and have Michael B. Jordan, just make Sue black. That was my only problem with it. Just make them both black. I think they got scared. Oh, I don't know if we want to do an interracial couple. Like, just if you're gonna have the two of them black, just have Sue black as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. How do you feel about an all African American cast for the Fantastic Four? Like every the entire team.
I don't have a problem with it at all. I think it puts black characters in such an interesting standing because we don't get to see a lot of black characters be um in that kind of place of power, and especially in that kind of place of intelligence a lot. And so it would be interesting to see. But again, that's why I was kind of the belief, like, if we got this strong black woman character in Sue in a way, and she was intelligent and all these other things, I think that would have been a great way to make that movie stand out instead of just going, nope, well, we got Black Johnny and that's all we got. It's like, of course Johnny's black because he could be like this, fast talking guy. We've seen that though. Like, that's not
Right.
different than any role we've seen a lot of black characters in. And I think they had a chance to do something really interesting with Johnny and Sue that they just missed the boat on for whatever reason. I kind of believe that that's a studio thing that they were too afraid to make them both black.
And to your point about certain characters do and don't work, like there's been many fans over the years say, why was Denzel never Batman? Why was any
Uh,
number of great black actors? But to your point, dude, like that goes back to the Bruce Wayne character from the ground up, doesn't it?
yeah, and I mean, just to go back to my point of how race is intrinsic to the story and the character you're telling, to me, Batman cannot be a black man. I just don't believe that. There are certain things with his character that just do not work with a black man. For one thing, Bruce Wayne comes from old money. There are
Right.
no black there are no black Americans that come from old money. It wouldn't happen. It just doesn't work. And there are other things about his belief system that just don't work with a black character, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there is such a need in today's climate to, I don't know if retrofit, maybe make something make sense for today. And I totally get it in a lot of regards, and I can't say I have an issue with any of it. Um, this is off topic a little bit, but my thing about making Michael Clark Duncan Kingpin, the Daredevil movie, which is, yes, it's a horrible movie. Kids, don't ever watch it unless you want to either bash your head in the wall or have a good laugh, or maybe a little bit of both. Um, the thing about that is, I didn't have a problem with him. I had a problem with the fact that the Kingpin was a white mobster and he was fat. But we replaced him with a near 7 foot African American jacked up. Again, don't care about the color, but it seemed like I love the actor, but it's like, wait a minute, why are we? And the director at the time was like, well, look, we have to have someone that can physically match up with Matt Murdock. I'm like, the Kingpin does match up with Matt Murdock. Just because you see the drawing of a fat guy in a comic doesn't mean he can't fight. Like, that's not, I don't know. I think there's a lot of cases, man, over the years we've seen where it's like, maybe we need to do this. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know. To me, it all goes back to, does it serve, like you said, the character, and does it serve the story?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to me, race doesn't matter because the thing is, race isn't real. When you really think about it, it's not real. It's
Very
something
true.
that we have come up with as a society. So, but at the same time, when you are constructing stories and when you're talking about narratives and creating characters, if they are a big part of the world you've created around this character and everything that they are, then yeah, you shouldn't change their race. There's certain characters that I don't think you should change their race. Another guy off the top of my head that doesn't work if you change his race to black, for example, is Iron Fist. He doesn't work as a black character because of where he comes from. Now I think he works as an Asian character, but
Yes.
not so much as a white character. I mean, not so much as a black character. I mean.
Right. I get you. Yeah, I don't want to turn that in. I don't want to turn this into that, but it gets my head going different places. And You know, anytime I hear about the casting of something that I'm a fan of, or maybe not even particularly a fan of, something that's like geek culture kind of stuff that I'd ordinarily be attracted to and want to check out, my first question is, well, does this serve the story? Does it serve the character? And if I don't know, like,
Yeah.
who am I to say? Because I'm gonna be straight with you. When they cast Heath Ledger as the Joker, I said, well, that's a mistake. This guy's. I did, man. I'm not gonna lie. This guy was the flavor of the month. He's got some spotlight on him. Good luck, kid. Man, I've been eating my words ever since because, as we all know, this guy was insanely phenomenal as the freaking Joker. So I have been wrong. I have no problem being wrong. So since then, I've tried to reserve judgment whenever I hear casting decisions I maybe don't agree with too much.
Yeah.
It is
I
what it is.
I totally understand that. I had reservations about Chris Evans at first. But I mean, you talk about a guy, I would say this might be a hot take, but I would say if anybody embodied their character in the MCU, it's Chris Evans. I know everybody is high on Robert Downey Jr., but I would say by the end, Chris Evans became Captain America.
Just as much as Christopher Reeve became Superman. I agree with that. 100%. Because I'm okay with Evans doing other things. I'm not stereotyping him or typecasting or whatever. But no, you're right. He did become Cap for sure, and he doesn't run from it, and I love that about him. And I love the fact that not only do we get great comic movies as adults, when as kids, I mean, I'm older than you are. As a kid, I yearned for this stuff and never got it. But not only do we get them, we get actors who love what they do. And it makes me so happy. So hopefully they'll get a Fantastic Forecast that will be just as happy doing
Yeah,
what
and
they
I
do.
mean that was one of my sad things with the last movie is that I thought that cast really got along, and you could tell that they wanted to work together and they wanted it to work. It just did not work for a number of reasons, but you could tell that cast was into it. You could tell that Michael B. Jordan was into it. He wanted to do superhero stuff. And you talk about the coincidence of the tale of two Johnnies, if so to speak, of two Johnny Storms that wanted to do something in the comic book world and it didn't necessarily work out, and then went somewhere else and completely killed it. Um, yeah, but yeah, I just I think that long as you get guys that want to be in the movie, and I don't know, I wouldn't even be that upset if people still want to revisit that cast in some ways, but I I mean they completely annihilated this property 2015. You probably have to get far away from everything they did.
Yeah. And that kind of answers another question I was going to throw to you. When you finally do get this thing running off the ground and it becomes a monster hit that I'm sure we all know it's going to be, thank goodness. We get this thing off the ground from MCU and it's killing it and making just all the money in the world. Do you bring back some of the actors from the other three FF movies just as a nod to what came before? I mean, just as small cameos here and there, maybe.
I tell you something I really do want to see, and I don't know how far you were up to date with like Marvel comics in the last 10 years or so. There's a Marvel comic where the Ultimate Universe, the Ultimate Reed Richards from that universe becomes a bad guy, right? And he becomes a villain. He causes this catastrophe that ends up, destroying the universe. And he ends up
Wow.
coming to the regular universe as a bad guy, and he's a bad guy in Hickman's run of the Avengers. If there's a way to bring that version of Reed Richards as a antagonist in in this universe in some ways, I definitely think they should use Miles Teller for it. I think he'd be great. I think he does all of the smarmy stuff really good. There's certain things about him that I think makes it easy to kind of not like him or
Mhm.
root against him. And I really like this idea that Bendis brought into the Ultimate Comics at the time, that Fantastic Four, they were young, that Reed was young, and he came from a kind of same place as Peter Parker. and his origin story is kind of written like a villain's origin story. So I really like the idea of Miles Teller coming from this universe and having the wink to that movie in this universe.
Man, dude, I think I'd be here for that. Uh, dude, I'm gonna look that run up. I'm gonna buy that collected. I got to read that now, just based on the premise. That sounds awesome.
I gotta remember which Ultimate book it was that he turned. I think it's Cataclysm.
Cataclysm. I'm definitely gonna. That'll be some reading for me coming up. Hopefully, it's on Comixology. That'd be cool.
Oh, I'm sure it
So,
is. But yeah, yeah, I'm sure it's out there. I just don't remember the exact comic. I probably still have all the physical copies from it somewhere.
so if you had to, and I'm gonna put you on the spot. If you had to cast this film, and I'll give you the softball as the first answer. A lot of people, wherever this came from, I don't know if there was one person that said it and said, "Hey, you know who'd be good as Dr. Reed Richards?" And everyone on the planet went, "Yeah, that guy. That's a good guy." John Krasinski seems to be everybody's choice to play Reed Richards. If you start with him, let's say he's a shoe-in. Maybe if he's not, do you cast him as Reed? And if so, or if not, who do you cast? And then who do you build around him?
Well, I think the Krasinski thing came from Krasinski has been saying for a while he wants to do a comic book movie,
Oh, there you go.
and man, once you see him and once you see people like put him in the casting of it, oh, he makes so much sense.
He
He
looks
makes
good,
perfect
right?
sense. I would cast him if you're gonna go older. Um, and I don't remember how old Krasinski is off the top of my head. But if you're gonna go older, I think he works. If you're gonna go in a 40s range like that, um, I would I would pick Emily Blunt as Sue.
That's good. Krasinski's 41, by the way.
Okay, yeah, then yeah, Emily Blunt is my pick for if you're gonna go with the older route.
Mm-hmm.
For Johnny, um, hmm, you've got to get somebody that can do the serious stuff and can do comedy as well. Um, hmm, that's a little bit tougher to cast.
He's got to be youthful, but at the same time, he's got to have the chops. So, yeah, because there's a way to do Johnny wrong and make it every typical 1960s rebellious kid that you've ever seen. You're like, oh God, this is so hokey. There's a way to screw this up big time.
Yeah, there is. I'm gonna jump all the way off left field with this, but
Yeah.
I think you could get like Zac Efron in this thing. If Zac Efron wants to do a comic book movie, you could throw Zac Efron.
Wow. Wow, that is totally out of left field. That
But
might
the thing
work.
is, like Zac Efron can do all of the heartthrob stuff. He's a good looking kid. He can do the humor. He's a recognizable name that he brings star power to this thing. I'm gonna go with Zac Efron.
You know what? I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I'm not going to sit here and go through my head because you're hitting these a lot faster than I think I could right now. But I like the choice. What about Sue Storm? Well, you hit me with Sue Storm. All right. What about Ben Grimm? This is maybe not as hard. All you need is an actor to portray him before he becomes a thing, and then he's CG, right?
Yes, unless you're gonna try practical like
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 Chickless.
like checklists. I don't know how well practical um works. I don't
And
know.
they didn't rock him up from the waist down. Only from the waist up was he rocked up. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
So
Ben Graham, you got to get somebody. Hmm.
I mean,
That,
do you take a chance? Do you do John Cena? Do you take a chance on a wrestler who's already ripped? I mean, a lot of people I'm sure thought Batista wasn't going to be able to pull this off, and he fooled everybody. Do you go with Cena at that? Is Cena too old for that?
well, if you're doing the older route, if you're going with you got to have somebody around Krasinski's age if you're gonna do them, believably as lifetime friends. Um,
Right.
so you could get somebody in their 40s. somebody that is like that can do like the New Yorker. You got it, because that's the other thing. Like he's such a stereotypical New Yorker. He's a around the way guy. Um,
Right.
you've got to get somebody that can do all those things, and that's why Chickless worked. Um,
I got one. I got one. And I want to see this guy do the Punisher again, but John Bernthal. I mean,
hmm.
the age is right. He's got that thick accent. He can do the Bronx. He can do New York all day long. I mean, he already looks like a tough guy. He is a tough guy, so it might be the way to go, man.
Yeah, the only thing that with that is, can I see somebody like Reed Richards hanging out with like John Barenthal? I mean, like, that
Very
sounds
true.
that looks kind of weird, but I think he could definitely do the role. I think he could do I think he could do most things you throw in front of him. He's a fantastic actor.
You throw all right, so you throw him in flashbacks in School of Reed getting picked on because he's the school whiz kid, he's the nerd with the glasses with the tape on him, and John Barenthal's pushing guys out of the way and taking up for him. There's a flashback right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm having a harder time thinking of a thing casting.
You think that'd be the easiest one, man?
Yeah, because you got to have kind of a big guy that can act, and the thing is, a lot of the big guys, you have a hard time getting those guys that can act.
I think you got to go with MMA or pro wrestler. I mean, if you really want to get that big, because how many guys do you know? I mean, there's Chris. All right, there's Chris Hemsworth big, but he's dashing big. I mean, he's a gorgeous man. That's
See,
not what you want, you know.
I don't think you want you because yeah, you want somebody that is a believably like a guy that you would see around the block on in New York.
Right. Yeah.
So you don't want to go too handsome with him. Yeah, I'm having a tough time with this.
I'm going to go back to Cena. Wouldn't it be funny if Cena got that and then John Cena is yelling, "It's clobbering time," when right?
Yeah, that would be hilarious.
Because that's CM Punk, baby. So
Yeah, that would be hilarious.
that's good stuff.
Yeah, I just can't think of anybody off the top of my head that I
You
would.
know what it is? I'm doing the same thing. I think we think a lot of mainstream, and you got to wrap your head around the streaming services. Who's the stars on HBO Max and others? There's so many avenues now to get good actors from. Like in my head, I typically go, "Who's the hot guys right now?" Like, and I made the Heath Ledger thing earlier, but I'm doing it in my head right now. Like, who can I get? You could even go funny. You could even go a comedian. It doesn't even have to be a tough guy. It could be like a wisecracking. I don't know, man. You could do anything like that, really.
Yeah, I mean, I could see somebody that just he doesn't have to be big. He could be just tall, in the same way that Vince Vaughn is tall and he's a
Right.
comedian and he could work in the same way. Um, I don't know, man. That's for some reason that one's giving me a hard time.
I
Uh,
love Vince Vaughn, by the way. I'd love to see Vince Vaughn in the Marvel Universe. Look, we got to make that happen.
oh, you know what? I'm gonna throw one out there.
Hit me.
Tom Hardy. There you go.
Tom Hardy. I can see that. And you know what? I'm going to throw one back to you. Vince Vaughn as Reed Richards.
Wow, that would be interesting. Like, I don't know how many
I
people
love
would
it.
like that. Like they would be like, "Oh, Vince Vaughn."
Yeah, dude, I love that.
Yeah,
Vaughn is 50, so he's pushing the age. He's pushing the age. But man, I just love the guy. I just want to see him in the MCU in some aspect. I just got to see him. So, yeah, you know what? I can go with that. I think that works. Tom Hardy, he can do that character actor kind of thing, really well. So,
yeah,
Bane is the thing.
yeah. We definitely know he could do the voice stuff.
Yeah.
We definitely know he can do different characters. Given as much trash we could throw on the Venom movie, like we definitely know if given a chance, he will buy in, and he will, he will buy into some of the goofier stuff if you ask him to.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not bad
Pedro,
at comedy stuff.
you're right. You're totally right. Yeah, you're right. He can pull it off. Pedro Pascal is Victor Von Doom.
I
Is that
yeah
tough?
no I think he could work. Doom is one of those castings, man, where it's so easy to get it wrong, and it's
Yeah.
so, man, because to me, I think you've got to have Doom with some kind of, he's got to be foreign in some way. I don't want him to be too westernized, and I think
He's got
that's
to
a
be
mistake.
European, right?
Yes, and I don't want, because I think that's the kind of mistake they made with the first two that tried to cast Doom. I would like Doom to be European. I think he's got to have some kind of ties to his homeland, because being Latvian is such a big part of his character. Um,
Yes.
you got to have somebody that's menacing, of course. Man, it's a shame. Like, I thought Toby Cabell was a good casting. They just did not do well with that Doom at all. That version of Doom was
Oh
terrible.
no. Yeah.
Uh, but Tony Cabell is a great actor, and I think he would have been fine given a better script and some better source material. Um, trying to think off the top of my head, who can I think of that would be a good Doom? Um,
And that opens up if you start talking about tall, exotic, European, classically trained actor, dude, that opens up the field to movies and to actors outside of the States that maybe we are not very familiar with. That opens it wide open. I mean, I like the idea of maybe Von Doom being not so well known of a guy, that could just kind of embrace the role and,
yeah,
you
I
know,
I would love it if they could find like a lesser known actor that we haven't seen do anything that mainstream. Uh, I know the message board pick for a long time. I saw a lot of people that wanted Viggo Mortensen to be Doom. I would see that a lot on message boards,
right, right.
and I think he would be great. Uh,
I'll hit you with one that's probably not going to happen because he's 61. Adrian Paul from the Highlander TV series.
that would be fantastic. Just the
Wouldn't that be
visual of him
great?
being Doom would be great.
God, I just imagine him taking that charm that he had in the show and then turning that charm evil. Oh my God, dude, it gives me cold chills. I think he'd be great at that.
Um, yeah, I think I got mine.
All right.
Luke Evans as Doctor Doom.
Interesting.
Luke Evans, of course, he's done the Hobbit movie. He was
Right.
in the Fantastic Four. I mean, not Fantastic Four. The Fast and Furious movie. I think it was Gaston, right? In Beauty and the Beast.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Luke Evans, I think, would be great. He's in that same age range as the other people we cast, Krasinski and Emily Blunt. So I think that's my pick.
You know what? I like the guy. I don't hate this at all. I think that would totally work. I like him as well. I mean, yeah, you're right, man. They have to go European with this. This is not something, not a white guy. You can't do a white guy for this. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, not an American born. Yeah, you just can't. It doesn't make any sense. He has to have some sort of ethnicity and European and the whole nine. And so here, all right. All right. Here's a question. If you made him like he's still European, but if he's African American, that doesn't really affect the casting at all, does it? I mean, this would make complete sense, wouldn't it?
Well, it depends on how you're approaching it. If you make him African American, like I said, because the whole thing of him being from Latvian and being essentially a Latvian dictator by the end of this thing,
Right.
which I don't want them to steer away from any of that. I want him to be very much a part of Latvian culture. I definitely want some of the stuff like him having some power in Latveria. It's not just like he's just from Latveria. I want him to have like some kind of nobility. Um, and that's what would make it tougher to make him African American. Um, and see, that's why I say Luke Evans, because I know that he could do all of the nobility stuff, and I know that he can be regal in some ways.
Right.
And not to say that you can't get a black actor to do the same thing, but I think when you trace like the lineage and stuff, it makes it harder to believe as a character that he's from Latveria, and like that he has ties to like even being, a dictator of some way. Um, hmm.
And plus, if you go that route, I don't know if you, I don't know when like you're right. At the end of the day, he's a vicious, cruel dictator of a country. So does that feed into a stereotype also of sort of a, I don't know. It gets to be a, I don't know. You start tap dancing on different lines and trying not to cross certain lines or whatever. I mean, it makes me glad I'm not involved in the conversation of casting. Like you think it would be fun. You think it'd be crazy fun, but at the end of the day, it's probably not crazy fun trying to figure this stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, the other thing that I like about Luke Evans is tall. And I
Yeah,
think if you're getting the Doctor Doom, he should be tall. He should be imposing. You don't
right.
want to get somebody that's too short. Uh, I mean, of course, movie magic, you can make them look tall. Um,
And I hope they would find a way around the name because there's a guy walking around named Von Doom. His last name is Von Doom. Shut up. Like, so hopefully it's like the way it's pronounced differently. And then it becomes, like you said, westernized. The American, like the American papers print Dr. Doom and it's not even pronounced Doom. Maybe it's got a different pronunciation. I think that would totally work as well.
he has to speak in the same way that I would expect Doom to speak. And don't get me wrong, like Doom is my favorite comic book villain. So I have high I have high expectations for Doom, and if Doom is not right, I feel like it ruins the whole thing. And I felt the same way with the 2005 movie. Like while I enjoyed the 2005 movie, the Doom is a deal breaker for me. I don't think that is what I would want to see Doom as, and that doesn't mean the guy that cast it was bad. I really like that actor, but I just think the way the way they used Doom in the movie didn't work for me. Um, I want Doom to be imposing. I want him to have all the one liners of, you know, he needs to be he I have high, criteria for what I want my Doom to
Mhm.
be.
Well, a bad villain can break a movie in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
it becomes too much mustache twirling, and it becomes tied the girl to railroad tracks. It's too much. And I've watched action films where I've completely taken, and I'm thinking of Punisher Warzone right now, where Ray Stevenson was great as a Punisher. Dude, it's like they took him directly from the comic book covers themselves, and I was like, oh my god, that's Frank Castle, baby, that's perfect. And then we saw Jigsaw, and I'm like, wow, that sucks. I was not impressed, and I can't say that totally killed it, but man, it had a hand in it for me killing that movie because he was so over the top. Um, I don't know, man. I mean, what did you think about that? How did you think he was casting that?
Yeah, he was way, way over the top. But see, again, I think that is at that time where they were trying to see what worked in other movies, and at the time, everybody wanted to do a Joker-esque character, and so it's like we got to do this over the top, overly psychotic character because that's what sells in these comic book movies, right? That's what works, right? And it's like, nope, you don't
Right.
you don't have to do that with every comic book villain. They don't all have to be that. They don't all have to be, super psychotic and super, campy. Um,
Right.
of course, the Jigsaw we got in the Netflix show is miles better.
So good. So good. Dominic West was from the War Zone, and I like Dominic West a lot. Good actor. All wrong for that part, in my opinion. Um, yeah, for sure. Ben Barnes played Jigsaw in The Punisher. That also starred John Barenthal. So We'll do a Punisher episode one of these days. I can't wait for that. That'll be fun. So I guess to take this thing home, man, I know Marvel's going to do it right. I have no doubt in my mind. And I know you've been looking forward to the Von Doom thing. I know Dr. Doom's your guy. And I'm looking forward to this. So narrow it down for me, man. What do you got? What's your last word on the Fantastic Four?
I think when you look at Fantastic Four, in some ways, Fantastic Four is the quintessential team book because they hit a different dynamic than any other team book does. And I think when done right, they've got a multi-million-dollar franchise on their hands.
I couldn't agree more. This thing's going to spawn several sequels. I have no doubt it's going to be a hit. Marvel Studios has not let me down yet. We've said before here on the show, there's been a couple of films here and there that's a little bit weaker than the one that came before it. It is what it is. You can't bat 1,000 all the time, but if there's one studio that can do it or come close, it's definitely Marvel. So the property's in the right hands, the IP's back in the hands it needs to be in, right where it belongs, in the house of ideas, so to speak. And I can't wait to see what happens next. Whether WandaVision is our way in, whether Ant-Man's our way in, Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness could be the way in. There's any number of ways to bring this thing into the MCU. I, for one, can't wait, and we'll see where they go from here. And that is the Fantastic Four. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.